Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, great. The same here. I see you and hear you. And Ian, I'm recording this conversation so that I can, at the end of it, I can share it with the group.
sounds cool to me.
Okay, great. I think I hear you. Maybe my sound is not big enough. Okay.
How's that doing?
Yes, yeah, it's fine. I think it was at the problem was at my end. I was not kind of. Uh, it was very low sound here on my speakers. But now
Okay,
everything is fine.
very
So,
good.
so thank you, Ian, for agreeing to do this chat, as you say.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's always lovely to talk to you.
great.
And uh, since the original idea was that we could share it also with the group, and I have already introduced you in, like I have written a couple of pieces where I introduce you. So I'll not go much into your introduction because I assume that these people already and by now know you. But what is very interesting is that, uh, you know, all this I'm sorry I'm using the word, but all this industry of personal growth and spirituality, it is talking about like all everywhere, like Advaita, and you know all the philosophies are talking about that you you are something who has the mind, you are not the mind, and therefore somehow this perception has been made that mind is the enemy. So once you start getting into this philosophy, somehow having thought feels like it's a crime, that oh my god, I had a thought right now, and uh, it kind of as you use the word, it's a sort of shaming that we do with ourselves, right? And then you come and you say that, oh, it's not so, it's completely okay, like these are all, we have all these inner parts inside us, and mind,
Yeah,
mind in your own words, mind is a dynasty, and you are the patriarch or the matriarch depending on who you are. So would you please expand on that, like I what do you mean, like what do you mean by these inner parts, and how do you work with them? Because this, it's difficult to handle this part. There, if it was one, life would be so easy. It looks like there are so many of them.
yeah, I agree. It's
So would you please like to expand on that?
well, so where do I start? I mean, the thing that was most obvious to me, having been totally rooted in consciousness or realized space or whatever we call the experience that most spiritual paths have been trying to point out to people.
Mhm.
It's like having dwelt in that for a while and saw that it wasn't really a place to live. It's a resource.
Mhm.
And what was the fascination for me is what actually is going on in this human being.
Mhm.
And what I discovered, it's quite a long time ago now when I was discovering the fact that Ian isn't just one person.
Mhm.
Ian is a whole, as I'm now calling it, a dynasty
Mhm.
of identities.
Mhm.
In the early days, I didn't really understand that. Now I understand it and I've been working with it for years.
Mhm.
But inside of us, the picture is that we are actually need driven organisms.
Mhm.
And so we have to validate that fact And so if we are need-driven organisms, how can our needs be irrelevant? They're
Mm-hmm.
very relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And the way in which we are structured is that we have any number, I've never counted,
Mm-hmm.
quite a large number of independent identities
Mm-hmm.
inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And at any one time, one of those identities is being me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in simple terms, it is quite like the apps on your phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. I see.
One of the identities gets launched,
Mm-hmm.
and he then takes over the whole screen and the
Yeah.
workings.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that particular app, weather, only tells you about the weather.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it is just so important to recognize this.
Mm-hmm.
Inside of Drew,
Mm-hmm.
there are many, many, many different identities.
Mm-hmm.
And the best person to tell you about them is your partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As you know, my partner Anna is very good at identifying the different identities in me.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing that I discovered is that it's okay. When I was first discovering this, the only example I found was schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm. Or multiple personality disorder.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's appeared in recent terms. When I was
Yeah.
studying
Yeah.
psychology,
Yeah.
schizophrenia was the only explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the truth
But.
is, everyone that I've worked with over the last 30 years
Mm-hmm.
has said to me, "You're absolutely right. When I really pay attention, when I really stop and look and listen,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like that. I've got all these different parts."
Mm-hmm. So, if, as you say, we have all these different identities inside of us or different parts inside of us, which in modern terms are like different apps we have on our phone. And
Yeah,
when you launch one of them, it takes over the entire space,
yeah,
and that is something which is there at that moment, which becomes the whole screen of the phone.
yeah.
But then, uh, who is the one who is holding the phone?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, how do
I'm
you?
going to answer it.
Yes, that's what I want to know from you.
I'll answer it, but I sometimes take a bit of time
Okay.
to see what my answer is.
Yeah.
Look, the biggest thing in spiritual terms is this idea that just be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was beginning to look inside of me, it wasn't obvious
Mm-hmm.
that any one of those particular identities in me was the self, the famed self that we're all searching for, just allowing ourselves to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't there isn't an identity that is holding the phone.
Mm-hmm.
The phone is held by what I would call a function.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a function in me that I
Mm-hmm.
currently call live perception.
Mm-hmm.
And live perception is looking out of your eyes right now
Mm-hmm.
and seeing there's a screen in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
And live perception doesn't have an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's prior to meaning. Live perception is receiving the information from our senses
Mm-hmm.
before we give it meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that function
Mm-hmm.
is holding the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and the personality, as I call it, is like an autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
The personality also reads the information in your senses and automatically selects an identity
Mm-hmm.
to meet the needs of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But the autopilot isn't that advanced. It doesn't understand whether the bit of behavior it just launched
Mm-hmm.
really meets the needs
Mm-hmm.
of the individual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It only knows, oh, I used this last time, I felt this,
Mm-hmm.
so let's launch it. And live perception, that facility in you, has the opportunity to check that out and say, do I actually want this Drew to ask the next question?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh, uh, but uh, the, the the problem, if we consider it to be like all these different parts and identities coming up and taking the screen space, our inner screen space, so to say.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you control that then? Because the thing is that more often than not, an app opens itself. If
Yeah.
and
It appears that way, yeah.
yeah, and more often than not, you are not able to shut it down when you want it to shut down, and probably you don't want that when you want some other app right now. You are facing a very difficult situation. Suddenly, there is a storm of emotions, anxiety comes up, and it is at that moment when I would like to summon the centered part of me, the relaxed part of me. How do you in your way summon that?
No, it's that is, the fundamentally great question. And the answer is with practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, first of all, when you really understand what's going on, like
Mm-hmm.
you establish an understanding in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only a small window of opportunity when the launch happens. There's only a small window of opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to close it down.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you have to wait until the app's run its little storyline.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it really is, I mean, it's so unspiritual. It's all about training, it's all about skills. It's like
But
using your
mm-hmm.
awareness, paying
Mm-hmm.
attention
Mm-hmm.
to the app because you feel it come in. When you really pay attention, you feel the apps wanting to launch,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
So,
not easy. This is probably the most difficult thing anybody could ever do.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I often use this idea is that, you know, your personality, all the different identities are like a herd of wild horses
Mm-hmm.
that have been doing what they want when they want to do it the
Mm-hmm.
whole of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're coming in and saying, wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say when you can speak.
Yeah.
And
So, okay,
yeah,
okay, please, sorry.
no, you tell me.
No, I wasn't telling you. I was just
Oh,
trying to
oh,
ask you
yeah,
if
no, I see how language is so
yes, yes, yes,
powerful and so
yes,
potent. We
yes.
don't understand the power of language,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and the apps, our identities
Mm-hmm.
are listening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing about the point about shaming is
Mm-hmm.
that the identities that already feel ashamed of their existence,
Mm-hmm.
they're listening out, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
hear the words and they'll take it as proof
Mm-hmm.
that what they believe is true.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So, in the same context of what we were talking, I wanted to ask. So, where do you see the place of self-awareness in this entire process? Because, okay, I'll tell you why I'm asking you. Because uh, while the traditional spiritual, paths, they also talk about self-awareness, but from what I understand of what you are saying, this is not possible to be able to find, first of all, to be able to know that some app is about to launch, and then to find that window where you have the power, not this one and this one, to be able to choose which one to launch at that moment, which reaction of, I mean, that would be practically impossible if you are not constantly aware of everything that is going on inside of you. So, I mean, would it? Do you think that this process that you are saying also involves uh, being in a state of self-awareness, or maintaining the state of self-awareness practically all the time as a background app?
Yeah, but it's not as big a deal as that statement makes it to be.
Hmm.
It is, you know, it's skillful.
Hmm.
These are skills that seem to occur in my experience.
Hmm.
You know, but I've managed to show people how to sharpen these skills for themselves. So it's not about being self-realized, but it is about paying attention. It's about, you know, using your awareness, using life perception
Hmm.
to be aware. In a way, an interesting term came up recently, like self-surveillance.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not that I'm paying attention all the time,
Hmm.
but I'm listening out for the approach of something that could, represent a difficulty.
Hmm. Uh, okay. Continuing on the same track, uh, let's say it so happens, suppose, I notice, I'm talking about personally me, uh, uh, and I'm using it as an example. Let's say uh, I noticed there are two kinds of apps, and I'm sorry, I'm bringing the classical spiritual terminology here, but let's
Yeah,
say,
that's all right.
let's say, they say, um, the absence of me, the absence of I. I, in this, not in the sense like, I mean, you are obviously physically present there, but in the sense that when you are completely present in a moment, and I'm not talking about uh, Eckhart Tolle's ideas of presence, but I'm talking about like when you are completely focused into something, and at the same time, it is not what we call absent-mindedness. That is one thing, like something you enjoy doing at that moment. Every cell of your body is involved in that, and at that moment, you also are completely aware. So it's not like some functions are missing. This is one state when it feels like I and my story do not exist at that moment. Like, there is no continuity of Dhru's past at that moment. This is one scenario. The other scenario is when you are completely absorbed into a stream of thoughts, like what I call, riding the thought train. Like, you're so absorbed. Again, in that moment, you don't exist, but there is a qualitative difference between these two scenarios when you are
Yeah,
present fully and when you are absorbed there, right? So
yeah,
uh, parts, these identities or parts, they have the power to absorb you into them and make you forget, I mean, make you forget that you are, but in a different way,
yeah.
where it impairs the functions, it impairs your ability to respond to the needs of the current situation. And
I agree.
how, so uh, how do you not, I mean, how do you pull out yourself from that, being completely absorbed into that? And how, I'm sorry, Ian, I'm not used to, you know, uh, have this feels more like some of my friends who are doing podcasts, so I'm not used to that format as such, so
Yeah,
I may not have the right way to go about it, so I'm just going with the kind of questions that are coming to me.
no, that's great. That's great. And what you've outlined, I agree with,
Mm-hmm.
and it's skillful. It's a new set of skills to know. I mean, it is possible to see that you're completely absorbed in one of the identities right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
possible to see that, and it's possible to communicate that. You know, which means that you're not 100%
Yes.
absorbed
Yeah.
in it, but you're aware that you're absorbed in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been launched, and this is not a good idea to try and do something in particular that requires awareness
Mm-hmm.
while this app's running. And so it's possible, in those six situations, you could wait until the app is finished.
Oh, but by the time it is finished, it is like one of those tornadoes that go through Florida and destroy,
Yeah,
you
no,
know.
but it is true. It's
Yeah.
true. You know, this is, I'm not suggesting some easy practice,
Mm-hmm.
but I am communicating something fundamental about the way that we work.
Mm-hmm.
And when there are different kinds of identities performing different functions, and that's all part of the new awareness of what function are they actually performing. Some of the hurt identities are so deeply protected and buried in you that you don't really see them, but they're exerting an influence
Mm-hmm.
over other identities that are trying to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like having a fundamental understanding of, it's almost like an operating system. How do we language this? And in a way, it is like an operating system.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you're aware of it, the more you understand what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
the more you,
Mm-hmm.
and so this is a very big question, you know, who is the you that is going to manage them? And I would say that over time,
Mm-hmm.
because when I was first looking,
Mm-hmm.
it was very clear to me that there isn't this self for me to be that knows what to do and what to say in every situation. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, when I paid attention to everything and discovered this and that, there was an identity in me that I now call the functional self
Mm-hmm.
that built up a new set of knowledge about how to manage
Mm-hmm.
the individuals in me.
Mm-hmm.
So it is about training one of your identities to be the manager.
Okay, so you say that um, there is no background identity, no background me, which is the manager of all the cells, right? Uh, there is nothing which stays as a permanent director of this company, or you know uh, of this drama.
Yeah,
uh, there is no one telling them, okay, it's time for you to come, this is your exit, someone else comes there. there is complete absence of I this directorial identity. That's
Yeah.
what you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay, I am. You are going to mess up with my mind for sure today.
Yeah.
Anyways, uh, again, Ian, the first contact I had through before I participated in your workshop and this was through your book. If I remember the title correct, it was Emotional Hostage,
That's right. Yeah.
uh, Negotiating Your Freedom,
That's
something like
right.
that.
Yeah.
The second line was something. So
Negotiate your freedom.
yeah, negotiate your freedom, right? So uh, and while reading the book, I understood. I mean, what I got was that this negotiate your freedom was your way of saying that this we have these different parts. And uh, would you mind, because you know, I want to add this one example which you gave, and I have used it so often that I think somehow I've started believing that it's mine. Okay, so the example, okay, this is for the friends who might be listening this or watching this. That if you know, I often use in some training workshop or lectures that and that we we have lots of needs. I was using in the context of needs, like we have lots of needs, right? Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons of unhappiness is that our basic needs are not fulfilled, and it's so simple. Like if you have some need and if you don't deal with it, I am not saying fulfilled, but if you don't deal with it, it is going to give you some trouble in life. So these needs are uh, I mean, Ian, this is what he said, as I remember, that these needs come from different parts. The inner part that he is talking about, we have these inner parts, and each of these inner part has its own inner needs. And these inner parts are like, imagine you have few children, 3 4 5 children, and okay, if you had one child and the child says, daddy, I want ice cream, life is simple, go get him ice cream. Or daddy, I want to go to the park, you take him, the life would be simple. But since there are multiple kids, one of them wants to go to the park, another wants to go to the football match, third one wants to stay at home, and the fourth one wants to do something else. And each of them want it very much, and one of them uh, you know goes on a hysteria, big emotional drama. And just because that one is making a hysteria at this moment and you just can't handle it, what we try to do is we try to fulfill that need. And like, okay, fine, you just take this what you want and then you relax. And then it is at the cost of other guys needs, and eventually at some point those one of those other guys will come up. This is what you were describing in this workshop. And yes, I see this, I recognize this in myself, in people around me, that uh, majority of the unhappiness is not coming from not being able to get what you want, but it is coming from having too many things at the same time and not knowing how to deal with any one of them. You want security also, but you want prosperity also. So because you want security, you want to take a job where you get money, uh, uh, at the end of month, but then you're not satisfied because it doesn't give you enough. So I mean, these multiple needs, and it is all about this. The question. Okay, now I'm coming back. I'm wrapping this whole, example which I originally started was because in that book you were talking about that this freedom that we want to talk about is coming from, in your way, it is our responsibility to negotiate, to create, initiate a negotiation and negotiate our freedom between this inner path, right? So how do
Exactly.
you do that?
Well,
I'm
how?
sorry, Ian, I am asking you all the
No.
questions about how to
Yeah,
do.
but these are the real questions because
Yeah.
it is, it's practical skills, it's life skills, practical skills that we're talking about. And I'd say to you, I mean, well, at the moment it's not, you haven't got much experience because you've only got one child.
Hmm.
But if you had 6 children, then I'd ask you, well, how do you decide? You know, it's not easy, but my way is that you have to see it, that you have you have communication skills that you develop with each of your significant identities, and you let them know that you're listening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're talking about the unconscious behavior of the
Mm-hmm.
identities because they've just been left to be the wild horses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm suggesting that in the kind of training that takes place, you have a sit down with all of the significant identities.
Mm-hmm.
And you let them know that you're listening, you find out what needs they've got, and their behavior changes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you creating a relationship, a good communication with each of the significant identities
Mm-hmm.
that happen to be involved in whatever issue you're actually facing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there isn't an easy answer. It's like, how do you decide between six different people
Mm-hmm.
wanting six different things?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, it raises a much bigger question of,
Mm-hmm.
how do you decide?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, how do you decide when you realize that there isn't a right or wrong?
Mm-hmm.
All the rights and all the wrongs that you believe exist
Mm-hmm.
are part of our conditioning, and they're put there by some external authority
Mm-hmm.
that is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel it out. You begin to trust your instincts. You see, well, actually, I'm going to I'm going to experiment with this one being me, and let's see what happens.
You know, I'll tell you why it is more easy for most people, including me and most of the people I know, to stick to something more traditional spiritual approach. Because I'll tell you honestly,
Yeah,
because
no, I agree.
there is a sense of anchor. Like you have something to hold on all the time. You know that okay, this is something which once found has not gone away from me and will not go away from me. And what you're talking about is every situation is different, and maybe I mean you don't see the continuity of an anchor that you're holding on to, and it feels a bit scary to go
Yeah,
with that, like uh, without an anchor.
absolutely scary. Particularly, as I'm going to take away your biggest anchor of all, which is there's no creator. There's absolutely no creator. So you are the only authority in existence. Only you can decide what's right and what's wrong. And that is a huge responsibility. We weren't educated to do that. We weren't trained to do that.
Mhm. Ah, you know,
And I totally understand why all the things that exist because they offer a false sense of security to everybody.
yeah.
And I don't know that, I particularly want to take away
Oh,
your favorite pacifiers.
okay, I'll tell you honestly. Uh, uh, the idea of creator is gone from my system 20 years ago, and it is that's when I had a big spiritual crisis, because i i I was born and brought up believing in a creator, you know
Yeah,
and that whole idea, when it was gone, it was terrible phase for me. To come back, to put yourself together uh, in this form. And I used to always envy those people who uh, you know who had faith. I
yeah,
envy people who have faith, because faith makes life so easy. and here I am, where So for me, it was like, I think Viktor Frankl calls it neugenic, neugenic, some German word he uses, neugenic neurosis. Like the neurosis which comes from not understand. This is a neurosis, but a different
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah,
And so that anchor has gone for sure. But yes, uh, another anchor has come, for the last 20. It is the other anchor which helped me to go through this period without that anchor. And I think you know what I'm talking about and who I'm talking
yeah.
about.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. And it's true. It's true. We have to, in this process that I'm talking about, it is a question of building significance and seeing what can you rely on.
Mhm.
And over time and experience, you come to be able to rely on certain aspects of your own understanding.
One thing though, yeah, is that okay? When I'm using the word I or you as a generalization for everyone who is watching or listening. That when you are in the base state, you have you have all the wisdom available to you. You see that, okay, you understand everything. The problem happens when there is this intense emotional energy which takes you over, and that is more than any. I mean, the power of intense emotion is more than any logic, any explanation. I mean, nothing stands there. I mean, uh, so there has to be. Do you not feel, or do you have some ways where you also address that? Of course, I mean, without addressing this intense emotional energy, I think it's difficult to do what you to negotiate this freedom that you're talking about.
It's massively difficult when that happens, when that particular identity
Mhm,
takes you over.
mhm,
That's not a time to negotiate with it.
mhm.
The time to negotiate and communicate to your different parts is like a daily practice. The best use of meditation
Mhm,
is to actually have a conversation with your identities in from that meditation space.
mhm.
You approach them and you find out what's going on, and you it's it's extraordinary to discover what actually is buried inside of us. Is
Mhm.
to discover what actually created the behavior of that identity that you're talking about, the one that seems like a hurricane.
Mhm.
you know it's possible to find out what happened to him, how he took on that behavior that needed to create a hurricane in order to distract from the fact that he was probably hurt or something happened to him. And that
So,
communication takes place outside of you know normal behavior.
so you do not subscribe to the idea that thoughts are random and just they come out of nowhere, and or uh, they would be or you think there is some identity which likes to think random thoughts? No,
No, no,
I
no, it's good.
yeah.
I mean, basically, as I see it,
Mhm,
there's the thinking process,
mhm,
which is available,
mhm.
and it's not the thinking process that's a problem. It's like what you need to do is find out which identity is actually using the thinking process right now.
Mhm.
because each identity has access to the thinking process, to our sensory input. Now, each identity is capable of, changing the chemical constituents in your blood to make you convinced that you're actually angry. So, you have to slowly change your behavior. But it is always, as I see it, behind every set of feelings, there are two alternatives. One alternative is that your senses are picking up information from this very moment of the situation that you're in, or a particular identity has fed you that storyline, and you can't tell the difference by the content. It's exactly the same set of feelings, whether it's come from the present moment or from the identity, from recall. And so that's where your awareness needs to come in and see, oh my God, I'm feeling this right now. Oh yeah, no wonder there's a truck about to run me down. Or you look and see, well, why am I feeling this? There's nothing happening in my immediate environment to make me feel this intense. And so then that's how you differentiate.
And okay, this is the next logical question, because see, I'll tell you, there have been many spiritual teachers in the past who, I mean, in India, they also have special names for them. Someone is from Karma Yoga, someone is from Raja Yoga, and all different kinds of, right? So there were some from Jnana Yoga, for example, Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti, right? So now he would be, I mean, if you read his books or listen to his talks, they are very intellectual and fine, everything. But Osho, for example, Osho would always talk about him that, okay, I know that Krishnamurti is enlightened, but he cannot help anyone, or he's not helping anyone, because he's not prescribing a technique. You know, it is not, I mean, unless you have a way, how would you do what you are talking about? Krishnamurti was all the time talking about, instant nirvana, like in the moment, like, right? So fine, but what about, how do you do that, right?
Exactly.
So
It's
now,
fine up here. It's wonderful here in Miami, but I'm not going to tell you how to get here.
yeah. So if you had to uh, tell someone that, okay, fine, this is the approach you have, this identities, first of all, uh, pay attention, they are there, they are always trying to tell you something, and you are not suffering for no reason, you are suffering because there is something these identities are trying to communicate you, and then you do something about that, whatever is possible. But are there any practices or techniques that you think that might help people to be more aware of these identities, and also, most importantly, to catch that window of before the app opens up, right?
There absolutely are. When I first started talking about this 30 years ago, there was no backup. I seem to be the only one that had noticed, and I seem to be the only one that was saying, you've got to pay attention to these different identities. Fortunately now, psychology has actually caught up. And there's quite a strong movement within psychology now working with people's parts. And I'm so supportive of what they're doing. I've only worked with people that wanted to get enlightened. So,
Mhm.
my communication has been pretty well lightweight
Mhm.
compared to what people in psychology who are working with parts are doing. They work with people with very severe behavioral disorders and
Mhm.
addictions, and they
Mhm.
produce some very good protocols about how to do it.
Mhm.
So right now there's huge support in the world in a new area of psychology to work with the parts, to communicate with your parts,
Mhm.
how to do it. So yes, the techniques are becoming
Okay.
visible to the world and in the world. But it isn't an easy process. We can't just sit down and meditate and it all happens. You can't just get, self-realized and it all happens.
Mhm.
You know, you actually have to take the responsibility of holding the space inside
Mhm.
and starting with the most obvious identities that show up for you,
Mhm.
and you begin to communicate with them and you say, I can hear you,
Mhm.
you know what do you need?
Okay.
and
Uh,
and 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 at the same time, in answering your question, I probably ought to write a little manual, oughtn't I?
hmm?
How to do it, a simple
Yeah.
how to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No. I.
And I've had that on my mind for a few years, but
I.
it hasn't
Well,
arisen yet.
of course, I can understand that what you're talking about cannot be, I mean, summarized in a small manual. But at the same time, uh, if something is very important, it should also be so simple for people to, you know, to absorb it, and it. I mean, it should be concise enough that they can in a brief they would get the idea, and with some certain, I mean, honestly, I was simply asking for, do you recommend some practices for people to do, for
Yeah,
example,
no, I
maybe.
get it.
Hmm?
And the practice, where I what works, I found what works is that I sit down with somebody. I mean, that's
Hmm?
where I sort of dropped away from doing group workshops
Hmm.
to working individually with people,
I see.
because that was absolutely the way to do it. I meet with people, Skype came along,
Hmm.
and now I can talk to anybody anywhere in the world. And so we have one-to-one sit down inquiries into what's actually going on in them. And
Hmm.
I must admit, in the last year, I've seen that it would be a good idea to change my approach. My
Hmm.
approach always was that I wanted you to do the discovery. I wanted you to look inside and tell me what you see.
Hmm.
I wanted you to actually discover the fact that most likely you are all these different identities.
Hmm.
That was the way that I discovered it. I didn't want to tell people how it is.
Hmm.
I wanted them to discover for themselves. But now I've begun to realize, partly by looking at the work that part psychology has presented, and I see actually it does help people to give them a picture, to give them a way of doing this and a way of
Hmm.
doing that. So my ideas have changed in the last year.
Yes, and I think it would have, because I don't think people who come to such realization, they come, in a sequence, like, okay, now I am 10 meters away from that, now I am only 5 meters away from the real, now finally I have arrived. It doesn't come like that. It comes like somehow you stumble upon that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
those who have stumbled upon them did not realize the value of uh, the value of the directions that other people might have, because You just got there. Somehow you were dropped there. What about those who would
exactly.
like to go there? So in
Yeah,
that was the sense of asking,
yeah.
that
And
question.
exactly that. I mean, I discovered the problems that people were having
Hmm.
were all to do with the different identities, creating trouble for them. That was my realization after working for many years with people, is that, you know, it's not actually trying to get to a realized space. You actually need to deal with all the internal dialogue that is running inside that's filling the space.
So, uh, do you mean which is completely, I would say, 180 degrees apart, opposite of what the traditional spiritual ways are telling us, that you, as I understood from what you say, is that you need to not only pay attention to the inner dialogue but engage in it, right? You
Yeah,
need to be part of the self-talk. While the traditional spiritual teaching says that, forget the idea of self. The mind will come and say anything. Don't listen to the mind. I mean, why? Uh, in the beginning, when you start personal growth, you start with self confidence, self esteem, self love, self worth, and then you come in front of spirituality and it tells you that what self? Why do you need to have a relationship with yourself? And then again, you are telling to go back where you not only listen to the selves. First of all, you're telling that there is not a self, but there is a set of selves, and then not only to listen to them but to engage in a dialogue with them. That feels like completely different than what all the spiritual masters are telling not to have. Why do you need to have a relationship with yourself?
because they're creating the problems that you're having in life.
Mhm.
They're not the ones that are troublesome, are troubled identities that have, you know, none of them I discovered, none of my parts were bad. They
Mhm.
all arise from genuine needs that we have.
Mhm.
What's bad is that their behavior is pretty bad in a lot of cases. They will do. It's just like your son. When you don't listen to him, he'll start doing things, I imagine, like to
Yeah.
get your attention.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what he does,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's exactly the same thing. If you don't pay attention to those identities, they escalate their behavior till they get your attention,
Mhm.
and it's just like that. And it's really a good
You
idea to
know,
pay attention.
Yeah, this is like you like everyone is like, okay, I'm going to a very fancy restaurant where they serve some, in nice crockery and some, with lots of nice dressing and everything. And I mean, some small portion, this high-end restaurant. And then comes Ian and he puts in front of you blanched broccoli and carrots. He says, this is good for you. Even if this doesn't have any spices, this is the right thing for you. This is the feeling I am getting, because you are taking away all the fun and spices of these wonderful spiritual terminologies.
I am. I apologize, but I tell you,
Mhm.
I'm not offering you sort of
It,
boiled
no,
cabbage.
no, it was it. No, it wasn't cabbage. It was broccoli.
No, I know,
It
I
was.
know, but
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I apologize. I really apologize. I am so sorry that I have to bring you this news. I'm taking away all your sweets.
Mhm.
All those beautiful, meditational sayings and chants and stuffing myself swearing right
No, that's okay.
then. It's no, I, I think I've got a warning on my website saying, danger, don't read on unless you're willing to, have your beliefs destroyed.
Mhm. Yes, I know that.
But the rewards are, honestly, the rewards are unbelievably amazing. You know,
Hmm.
my relationship with my partner, Anna, she's been, we were both interested in this new area of psychology when she discovered it. And she came to me and said, "Oh my God," she said, "I just read this book, and there's this guy, Richard Swartz, who's written a book, and she said, he's talking exactly the same way that you do. He's talking about parts and identities and."
Hmm. It's just a moment, Ian. Just a moment, just a moment. Here's one book. I don't know. Maybe you see the flipped image or what? Do you see the flipped image, or can
No, I
you
can
read
see it clearly. Yeah, Guy Finley, the
Intimate Enemy? Yeah.
Intimate Enemy.
Uh,
Yeah,
this book was you can see, this is the only book that survived my great purge. I purged
oh wow,
more than 2,000 books to a library. I gave it away
yeah,
before 18, 20 years. But this book survived, and this book, Ian, is when published in 1998, and
yeah,
uh, this talks, uh, it has something of the very similar tones. What I don't know, you talked about some guy, some other author here,
yeah.
about the same thing. Like you also have a similar word. You said I forgot the name. What you said to that identity, some temporary, not temporary, but you use some word. Anyways, this
Yeah,
guy, his name is Guy Finlay. He uses the word typic. He calls them temporary person in charge. We have different persons in charge, and the
yeah,
one who is
yeah.
at the moment, he calls him temporary person in charge. He even has an I mean acronym, typic. He calls it.
That's
So
good. That's good. I
uh,
agree.
I mean,
But but
but
this
when
guy, the one I was telling you about, like he has fathered a huge movement in psychology.
Mhm,
And when Anna found the book and saw it was using parts terminology, lots of ideas that I've been talking about for 20 years, we were so interested. Anna's been doing a training with them,
mhm,
and it's been so amazing inside herself. Like we've had such a powerful time together with her using the techniques inside of herself. And even though she's been working with me for 20 years on her parts, this really gave her some very amazing therapeutic tools
mhm.
to work with her parts.
But Ian,
But it's a huge
seriously.
commitment. It's a huge commitment.
No, I understand. The reason I'm laughing is because it takes away all the fun of all the practices and all the mystery. I mean, you are taking away the mystery
Yeah,
from.
but not. I mean, it seems like that,
Mhm,
but when you truly find out,
mhm,
when you're able to, have a look into your past,
mhm,
which is inside of you as
mhm,
identities,
mhm,
when you find out what happened to that little boy Drew
mhm,
that hurt him so much
mhm,
that he's been hiding away inside of you all these years, and yet having a very powerful effect on your behavior.
mhm,
It's like when that's an even greater mystery. That's unbelievable to be able to bring him into the present and release the anxiety that he's been holding for 40 years.
mhm,
You
mhm,
know, these are amazing experiences. These are amazing mysteries. These are amazing intimacies that you can share with yourself and with your friends.
mhm,
You know, life is so much richer when you are dealing with something very real like that.
mhm.
But at the same time, I do understand how sweet it is, you know, all those years of meditation and spiritual practices served you well, but they didn't actually, they prepared you, they've given you your experience in awareness, in space,
Mm-hmm.
and you can use that space that you've discovered
Mm-hmm.
to look inside now and say, well, come on, tell me. I'm listening. I want to know.
Yeah. See, I told you and from the very beginning that I do. The very first time you talked about the workshop that about the parts and their needs, and it, it is so clear that it is like that, right? Uh, so personally for me, I was in marketing technology, I was sold on that, right? What I couldn't and still am not uh, uh, you know uh, able to connect is the way, um, you know for example, while I realize that there are these identities and parts and we need to do something about that, they will create a havoc in your life if you don't. But the one thing that I still don't get it is that how else would you do unless you have a central self, the one having,
Okay, well, you've got a central self.
a central self is,
You've got a central self, Drew.
well, if
You have.
I you see,
You have.
what can I say? uh, uh, let's not talk about me right now. I don't know. I'm a
Well,
seeker,
we have to talk
i'm
about you.
I'm a seeker,
We have
right?
to talk about you.
Yeah,
We have
okay.
to talk about you because it is always very personal.
Yeah.
How to do this is very personal.
So the the you know mm, you are asking me, do I have a central self,
Well,
or
no,
you're
I'm saying
telling
you
me?
do have one. Yeah,
um
we
I
we need
Okay.
to let him know that it's his job to manage the rest.
So that's what, what I feel, that there has to be, I mean, logic
Yeah,
dictates that there has to be
I agree.
someone
Well,
around whom everything else dictate runs,
we've given him the job now.
Okay. You negotiated it too quick. Yeah, I see, and I
But
know
you're
you have
right.
a.
You're right.
Mhm.
You're right. Uh, I have got an identity that I call the functional self now.
Mhm.
He's the functional self. He does the managing.
Okay.
But he learnt his skills from my years of inner exploration. There were lots of successes and lots of failures with my identities. You know, lots of fuck ups. I
Mhm.
still do stupid things, and it's okay. And it's like
Mm.
we need to give him the job, and then he can start.
Yes, it's it's quite a bit to take in and absorb and uh, create a cohesive. Uh, I wouldn't say theory, but uh,
Yeah, no, seriously, a theory is
ideology.
required. Yeah, a theory is required.
Yeah.
You know, and I totally agree with you. You know, and that's why I've been changing my ideas and understanding in the last year to see how important it is to have a cohesive map
Hmm.
of what actually work. How we work.
Hmm. Why? Okay, I think I know you have in, let's say, 15 minutes your session. coming up.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyways, uh, uh, it's really nice that you are here, and I would love that everyone in the group, and not only in the group, I will also share this link outside the group where you can also share with your friends. And I would like your ideas to reach more people. And yes, I'm sure if they are very much rooted into one particular ideology, which is coming from many, many, many centuries, it is going to give them some trouble for some time,
Mhm.
until they they kind of find their own ideas, considering what they know, considering what you say. And then I will always envy those who have the, who live in the bunker of faith, because that's the safest place. No ideologies, no new ideas are going to ever reach there, right? I envy them, but unfortunately I am stripped of all the bunkers and all, everything.
Exactly.
So I'm helpless, but I would envy those. They will be the lucky ones. Your ideas are not going to affect them, but to those who will be, I'm sure they'll, they have something to think of, something to correct, or something to add to their own way of being. um, I don't know. I never did anything like interview of someone, so I don't know how to start and how to end,
This is
but
good.
but
But shall I finish with my
please,
suggestion, practice
please,
of the day?
please, please.
Uh, I would imagine that pretty much everybody in your group is familiar with meditation.
Mhm,
So we can use that meditation space, the space that you find in meditation. That's the perfect place to do this self-inquiry work.
mhm,
You know, the whole of your next meditation,
mhm,
try it out, have a look,
mhm,
realize that you can communicate with the inner dialogue as it arises in you. You know, check it out.
okay. You do you mean to say actually do it as a group practice in a meditation
No,
hall, or they
no,
can do in their own space?
yeah, in your own
Yes,
meditation,
fine.
or
Okay, okay,
or a group,
okay,
but in your own
okay,
meditation,
okay, okay.
take the time,
Mm-hmm,
pay attention to the your inner dialogue,
mm-hmm,
and communicate with it.
mm-hmm,
Ask them what they need.
mm-hmm,
Ask them what's happening. Ask them, ask
mm-hmm,
them. Say, I hear you. I'm here. I'm listening.
mm-hmm,
Tell me what's going on. Tell me what you need.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so they can incorporate this in their daily practice like a meditation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, and
yeah,
and then let's see where it takes them.
exactly. And you.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, I always use the generic words. When I
No, no,
say I, you, they, them, I include all of us. I mean all of us.
I understand.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Ian. I really sincerely appreciate that you took out your time, and uh, I always enjoy talking to you. Uh, I mean, uh, I do value you and respect you, and I seriously feel good that we met and I know you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Drew. I really appreciate your friendship and I like your inquiring mind. You've been asking some good questions and it's sort of reminding me that it would be a good idea to create a little roadmap, a little
Mhm,
diagram about
mhm,
how I see our internal structure
mhm,
and how to work with it.
mhm. Fine. Then have a nice
And
day. Yes,
thank
please.
you
You
so
wanted to add
much.
something, please, please. You wanted to add
Yeah,
something.
yeah, love to you and your family.
Thank you.
See you
And
again next time.
sure, see you next time. Bye bye. Have a nice evening, I guess, afternoon, evening, and good
Yeah,
work. Yeah.
see you later.
See you. See you. Bye bye.